On today's episode of Locked On Oilers, is Phil Kessel a fit for the Edmonton Oilers, and can they afford it? They also have 3 contracts that could be on the move. Which one is most likely to leave? We will have that and so much more on today's episode of Locked On Oilers.
You're Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On Oilers podcast. I'm your host and former Oilers game day producer, Brett Holden. On today's episode, is Phil Kessel a fit for the Edmonton Oilers? I know I can hear the big dogs barking already. They don't have cap room. They don't have cap room. Well, in today's second segment, the Edmonton Oilers have 3 interesting contracts in Warren Foegele, Tyson Berry, and now Jesse Puljujärvi. So, which one is most likely to be moved? We will talk about that later on today. Plus, Phillip Broberg's season report card, his first full season in the NHL. Yeah, honestly, as a pro, really, because he spent most of the time in Bakersfield. So we will talk about that and so much more on today's episode of Locked On Oilers. Thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you find your podcast. Alrighty, let's start off with the Hot Dog King himself. We went from the Bison King the other day to the Hot Dog King today, and that is Phil Kessel. As most of you probably remember, when he won the Stanley Cup, he had a whole bunch of hot dogs inside the Stanley Cup. And if the Edmonton Oilers do bring him in, the Oilers win the Cup, could we see a part 2 to that? Potentially. But the first step would be the Edmonton Oilers bringing Phil Kessel in. Now, would Phil Kessel be an actual fit for the Edmonton Oilers? Well, let's go through the numbers. Over the last 3 seasons, pretty productive seasons for Phil Kessel in Arizona, all things considered in Arizona. Last season, he played all 82 games for the Arizona Coyotes. Really, a team that he really didn't have to do that. In all 82 games, he scored 8 goals, which was not very high, obviously, but not very high for Phil Kessel in general. But you also take a look at his assist numbers and you go, that's why he's Phil Kessel. 44 assists for Phil Kessel last season for a grand total of 52 points. Imagine if that 8 goals bumped up to 14, 15 even. And I know that sounds like that's a what if. Well, it's pretty easy to score 7 extra goals next to Connor McDavid. But then in the COVID shortened year, 56, he's a very healthy guy that I've maybe I shouldn't say that, but he is in the NHL, so he is a healthy guy. But he has been very consistent in playing a lot of games in the last 3 years, especially in Arizona. Last year, obviously, the 82 games, but in the COVID year as well, 56 games, all 56 games for Phil Kessel, 20 goals, 23 assists, good for 43 points in those 56 games on a very bad Arizona Coyotes team. And then the year before, 70 games played, 14 goals, 24 assists, good for 38 points. Not bad, all things considered. Not great when you consider him to be a top 6 forward. Could you imagine putting Phil Kessel next to either Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl? I know Phil Kessel is a very easygoing guy. I know he's one of those guys that just doesn't like the spotlight too much. And in Edmonton, he wouldn't really have it. Let's be real, if Phil Kessel were to come to the Edmonton Oilers, he wouldn't have to fight for the spotlight with Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Zach Hyman. I mean, Edmonton media loves Jesse Puljujärvi, so Jesse Puljujärvi would get a lot of attention. Darnell Nurse as well. Evan Bouchard gets a lot of attention. Jack Campbell now coming into the Edmonton Oilers. He will also get a lot of media attention. I mean, the Edmonton Oilers have Evander Kane on their team. Let's be real. That is not only local media, that is international. Well, I say international because I'm bring in the American audience as well, but Phil Kessel wouldn't have to be in the spotlight and wouldn't have to really worry about people constantly going, oh, Phil Kessel is doing this, doing that, the other thing. Basically, all the issues that he had in Toronto, he wouldn't have in Edmonton. But Edmonton is a very hockey crazy media place. So I could see him going, no, not for me. But he is coming off of he's 34 years old. He's coming off of an $8 million contract, which was signed by Toronto and Dave Nonis. So, tough one there. He did, as mentioned, $8 million contract, but for his next year, as mentioned, he's 34. He probably wants to win, and he's probably willing to take a pay cut. The Edmonton Oilers don't have a lot of space unless they move somebody, as we will talk about in our next segment. So I don't see Phil Kessel getting more than. This is the absolute ceiling for Phil Kessel. For the Edmonton Oilers as well, maybe 2.5. That's the ceiling. That is the absolute ceiling. Because you have to take a look at, again, 44 assists for the guy. He's also coming off of a major contract. He's a very solid hockey player, all things considered. He played in a very bad Arizona team. Would he make the Edmonton Oilers better? Well, he would probably slot into that top line, really, with Connor McDavid and Evander Kane. And could you imagine a line of Evander Kane, who's a workhorse, who's going to go into those dirty areas and basically smack you in the face, give the puck to the best player in the world in Connor McDavid, and then you have a Phil Kessel on the other wing just going, oh, yeah, thank you, I'll tap this in back door. I'll take that. I'll take that any day. Especially considering the pedigree of a Phil Kessel. Phil Kessel, I mean, he is a gamer. I know there's a lot of stories around him, so you can find a background on Phil Kessel very easily. Very easy. But if the Edmonton Oilers have been able to weather is probably the best word, weather the storm of Evander Kane, then they can take a guy like Phil Kessel. Now we're getting into my favorite stats of basically any hockey player. The goals for and goals against per 60 minutes. Or Phil Kessel, not fantastic. Not fantastic. Goals for per 60 minutes in all situations would have sat him 9th on the Oilers, so not too bad with a 3.45. Goals for per 60 minutes at 5-on-5 was a 2.77. The interesting thing is, that was the exact same as Kailer Yamamoto. Now, also, you have to consider he's not a defensive player, so his goals against per 60 minutes aren't going to be great to begin with. Then, on top of it, he's playing on a very bad Arizona Coyotes team. In all situations, the goals against per 60 minutes was at a 3.53, which was good for 26th on the Oilers, and 3.93 at 5-on-5, which would have been good for 29th. One away from last if it wasn't for Brad Malone. Now, you're not bringing him in for defense, and you realize that, especially if you're any team bringing him in. So, do those stats really matter? Maybe not. Goals for do, kind of, and he would be basically on track with Kailer Yamamoto. Is that a deal you're willing to make? Are you willing to move Tyson Berry, a Warren Fogle, Jesse Puljujärvi, or a Phil Kessel? Obviously, he's a free agent, so you're not making the exact deal, but you're making room for a guy. Is that a deal you want to make? I mean, let's be real. The first line, again, would be Evander Kane, Connor McDavid, Phil Kessel. Then the second line would be Zach Hyman, Leon Draisaitl, and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. I haven't even mentioned Kailer Yamamoto yet. There's still Jesse Puljujärvi, Ryan McLeod. That's why you almost do it if you are the Edmonton Oilers, because you are able to have all of these weapons at your disposal, especially if the Edmonton Oilers are going 11-7. That's scary for a lot of teams. Now, I know the Edmonton Oilers want to play with pace and quickness, and I understand that. As I put my notes away, I'm sorry, I'm reaching down. I understand that. Can Phil Kessel play like that? Maybe. We shall see, especially at 34. Would you make the move? Would you sign Phil Kessel? What would you do at all? Would you just say, hey, Philly, I heard Boston has some very nice hot dogs. I don't know why I said Boston. Just another team. Would you make the move for Phil Kessel? I want to know. Let me know. But there would have to be a corresponding move in order for the Edmonton Oilers to bring in Phil Kessel. They only have $2.7 million in cap space with the dead cap. So who would they move? Jesse Puljujärvi, Warren Foegele, Tyson Berry? We will get into that in just a second. But first, I want to tell you about our partners over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way for you to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news for every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, even golf. Hey, football, the NFL training camps are in full swing, people. And I would know because I'm getting chirped mercilessly in our fantasy football group chat, okay? So make sure you use BetOnline so you don't get chirped mercilessly in your fantasy football chats. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information. From live betting, scores, and podcasts, they have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. I reach over. I know people on YouTube must be like, this guy is moving all the time. I'm sorry. And if you're on the audio apps, I apologize because I mention how often I'm moving all the time. But either way, the Edmonton Oilers just signed Jesse Puljujärvi to a 1-year, $3 million contract. Again, as mentioned, that puts the Edmonton Oilers with about $2.7 million in cap space. They also have to re-sign Kailer Yamamoto and Ryan McLeod, and as I mentioned, Kailer Yamamoto is probably looking at that contract with Jesse Puljujärvi and going, I can make more than that. I can make more than that. Or about what he made, and, well, the Edmonton Oilers don't have $3 million to give him. So, in the next month, basically, as I was watching in full transparency, I was watching The Cult of Hockey with David Staples and Bruce McCurdy, and they brought up that really one of these three players are going to be moved in the next month. Who is it? Well, I mentioned Warren Foegele is one, Tyson Berry is the other, and with that new contract is Jesse Puljujärvi. Is it realistic? Yeah. Which one would you move? Well, Warren Foegele is sitting at a $2.75 million cap hit, so a movable contract, basically a quarter more, or quarter less, really, $250,000 less than Jesse Puljujärvi, so Puljujärvi's contract is tradable as well, so we'll get into that. But Warren Foegele is an interesting case. 3 years on his contract. Well, that was what he signed. He has 2 more years on that deal. He played all 82 games for the Edmonton Oilers this past year with 12 goals, 14 assists, 26 points. Pretty respectable for a bottom 6 guy. But when you're paying a bottom 6 guy $2.75 million, on a little production. Obviously, in the playoffs as well, he went AWOL is maybe the best way to put it, MIA. 13 games played, no goals, 1 assist. He was scratched a couple times in those playoffs. And then in those advanced stats, the 2.51 goals for per 60 minutes in all situations, which would have been good for 18th on the Oilers. And at 5-on-5, he was good for 19th on the Edmonton Oilers with a 2.34. Defensively, he sat 16th in both goals against in 60 minutes in all situations and in 5-on-5 with a 2.9 in all situations and 2.68 in 5-on-5. Not very productive. The Edmonton Oilers, and this is the hypothetical for the day, if the Edmonton Oilers are wanting to bring in a guy like Phil Kessel, Warren Foegele would probably have to see his way out because of that production. He's not producing offensively. He's not preventing the puck from going in his own end. He's not playing shorthanded, and he's not playing on the power play, really. Unless there's 13 seconds left and there's about to be a change from Connor McDavid, and they're about to go 5. So, what is Foegele bringing to the office, really? What is he bringing to the table for the Edmonton Oilers that makes them a warm body? Well, he did score 12 goals, 14 assists. His best friends are really close with Kyler Yamamoto, Ryan McLeod, and Evan Bouchard. And as mentioned, I mentioned this a lot, and I know a lot of old heads are going, it doesn't matter about the off ice, all that matters is on the ice. Well, on the ice, if you care about the people you're playing with, then you're probably going to be playing a little better, or at least a little harder. So he has that really good reputation, relationship with those younger guys who are going to grow into basically being the core for the Edmonton Oilers in the future. That's something you don't really want to mess up. But on the other side, this is a business. Warren Foegele is expendable. He does have a tradable contract. I could see Warren Foegele being the most likely guy to get out of the Edmonton Oilers, but there's still 2 more names to talk about. This next guy, I don't think, he's probably quite tradable because he's quite valuable to most teams or many teams or any team in the NHL that needs an offensive defenseman, but he sits at a $4.5 million cap hit. That is Tyson Berry. One of the highest scoring defensemen over the last 5 years, 3 years, 10 years, doesn't matter. Tyson Berry has been one of the most constant offensive defensemen in the league, basically since he was in Colorado. Well, except for that blip in Toronto, but we don't talk about that. He is a very, very good defenseman offensively, and once Dave Manson came in and Jay Woodcroft, his defensive game really became a strong suit for him, and especially all things considered with that Duncan Keith retirement, the Edmonton Oilers kind of can't afford to lose a puck mover like Tyson Berry. As David Staples was mentioning in their show, they were saying that Duncan Keith, was one of the Edmonton Oilers' better puck movers in the league, or in the season, and the Edmonton Oilers lost that in his retirement. Now the Edmonton Oilers, he is, I have always said Duncan Keith has much more value than people say, whether that's on the ice or off the ice. And now you lose that guy who has value. Now Tyson Berry, who I understand has a pretty decent sized contract. If you need space, it is kind of movable. Most teams want him. But he's good. That's the thing. You are losing a very, very valuable piece on your team if you do move on from him. This past season for Tyson Berry, not as great as the year before, and that is saying something. In 73 games played, 7 goals, 34 assists, good for 41 points. And then in the playoffs, as mentioned, his defensive game really hunkered down. In 16 games played in the playoffs, 1 goal, 4 assists, good for 5 points. And then we get into those advanced stats, my favorite numbers. In all situations for Tyson Berry, his goals for per 60 minutes was at a 4.25, which was good for 5th on the team. You know, those 4 guys, I guess, ahead of him. 97, 29, 91. And if I'm not mistaken, it was also number 93. So if you ever heard of those 4 guys, or if you can guess what numbers those are, you probably know those are pretty good hockey player. Then, following that was Tyson Berry. At 5-on-5, he had a 2.92 goals for per 60 minutes, which was good for 9th on the Edmonton Oilers, and 3rd on the power play for goals for per 60 minutes at 11.66. I mean, it's no... what's the right word? It's not a shock he's a good offensive defenseman, but he's also been solid defensively. In all situations, he was 2.51 goals against per 60 minutes, which was good for 7th on the Edmonton Oilers. And at 5-on-5, he was a 2.5, which was 9th on the Edmonton Oilers. So he is preventing the puck from going in, but also producing as well. The Edmonton Oilers can't afford to lose a guy like that, especially after Duncan Keith's retirement. Well, I'm holding on to Duncan Keith. I am. No, unless you're making a massive splash, I don't see Tyson Berry being a very smart idea for the Edmonton. And then the final contract that was just signed a couple days ago. Jesse Puljujärvi's 1 year, $3 million contract. Now, a lot of people take a look at that and they go, okay, well, he can go into the season with the Edmonton Oilers with the expectation of playing in the NHL, obviously, but also being an important part of that team. But also, if things don't work out, that is a very tradable contract, 1 year, $3 million for a guy who scored 14 goals, 22 assists in 65 games, good for 36 points. He was the 4th overall pick in 2016. I know I just said for a guy who scores 14 goals, and then earlier I trashed on Warren Foegele, but you take a look at those extended numbers or advanced numbers for Foegele, and it wasn't fantastic. But then you take a look at the advanced numbers for Jesse Puljujärvi, and you go, oh, those are fantastic. In all situations for Jesse Puljujärvi, 4.18 goals for per 60 minutes, which was good for 6th. One behind the guy we were just talking about in Tyson Berry, who was behind 97, 29, 93, and 91. So, pretty decent. And then at 5-on-5, he was 5th for goals for per 60 minutes, which was at a 3.26 clip. And then on the power play, which he didn't play, he should have got a lot more, to be honest with you. I know the Edmonton Oilers have Evander Kane, so he'll probably get the call on the power play. But if not, Jesse Puljujärvi was the best goals for per 60 minutes on the power play on the Edmonton Oilers, period. 12 goals per 60 minutes for Jesse Puljujärvi on the power play. Then he also prevents. Not only does he produce, but he also prevents. In all situations and at 5-on-5, Jesse Puljujärvi was the Edmonton Oilers' best player when it came to goals against per 60 minutes. The best player. And the numbers don't lie. He had a 1.88 in all situations with the Edmonton Oilers, and then a 1.8 at 5-on-5. People say the play dies on his stick. It's supposed to. That's what a two-way player does. And then he goes and makes an outlet pass and becomes a trailer with a very long stride and a pretty good skater, if you ask me. That scoring's going to come around, and all of a sudden, people are going to take a look at that 1 year, $3 million contract and go, that's a little bit of a steal. I'm not moving Jesse Puljujärvi unless things go wrong. I'm not moving Tyson Berry unless you're getting a massive deal in return. Sorry, Warren. The odd man out. Over the next month, me personally, I would probably move Warren Foegele again. I like his personality. I like his tenacity on the ice. But again, this is a business. Either way, we're in a nice spot where the Edmonton Oilers can sit there and go, oh, well, we could move this guy or we could move that guy. But either way, any move that we're going to make is going to make us better. That's exciting. We shall move into a guy who's coming on to the Edmonton Oilers for basically free. Well, not really, but he's a homegrown talent and played his first full pro season last year with between Bakersfield and with Edmonton as well. Was with the Oilers for the playoffs too. I'm talking about Phillip Broberg. So how did his season go? We will have his full season report card in just a second. But first, I just want to thank you so much for tuning in to Locked On Oilers and making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, make sure you tune in to Locked On NHL. Locked On experts give you a daily 30-minute podcast on all things NHL all year long. Stay up to date on everything in the hockey world with Locked On NHL, your daily 30-minute NHL podcast. Alrighty, we're moving into our final period of the day with Phillip Broberg, the Swede, who a lot of people see him being the future of the Edmonton Oilers defensively, as do I. I think he is a very solid technical defenseman. I know a lot of people have the easy, including myself. I also fall into this trap sometimes, but the easy comparison of a Nicholas Lidstrom because he was selected by Ken Holland, the Swedish basically where it ends. But he's a facilitating defenseman. Not only can he move the puck from his own end, he can prevent goals. He's a big body. He can be physical. He knows where to be. He has high IQ. He can shoot the puck. He can move the puck. He can skate. That's all you need from a defenseman. And he's only, 20 years old? 21? That's a pretty exciting future. But either way, his first full season in the pros or with the Edmonton Oilers, 23 games played for Phillip Broberg with the big club. With his first NHL goal, he only got one this year, 2 assists, good for 3 points. And then he played a game in the playoffs as well for the Edmonton Oilers. More of a seventh guy, just a guy to get some breaks, basically. But yeah, it was also mostly as well for Darnell Nurse, when, he had a horrible. And if I'm not mistaken, honestly, that might have been the game he was suspended. So there you go. There's the support there. Then 31 games in the AHL with Bakersfield. 4 goals, 19 assists for him, good for 23 points. And then in the playoffs, 4 games for Bakersfield, no goals, 1 assist, good for 1 point. So getting that experience down there for Phillip Broberg is the biggest thing for him, especially when you take a look at the advanced stats for him in the NHL in his 23 games. 1.92 goals for per 60 minutes, which was 22nd on the Edmonton Oilers in all situations. In all situations, goals against per 60 minutes, he sat at a 4.1, which was good for 26th. Then at 5-on-5, a 2.15, which was good for 21st for goals for. And then goals against at 5-on-5 was a 3.68, which was good for. I know that's a lot of numbers thrown at you. The importance aren't in the numbers there. It's more in where he ranked, the 22nd, 26th, 21st, 28th. A lot of work to do for Phillip Broberg, but as I mentioned, the biggest thing for him is that experience. He needs the experience. He needs to understand what it's like playing with the big club, playing in the NHL, how fast the game really is, how quickly he needs to make his decisions. Got a very good sample size, not only in the regular season, but also when he came up as a black ace for the Edmonton Oilers in the playoffs. Now, as mentioned, he already has a little bit of experience with Jay Woodcroft and Dave Manson. Played with them in Bakersfield. He also has seen them work with the Edmonton Oilers over the last couple of months. That's the biggest thing for Phillip Broberg. It's kind of a tough guy or a tough way to go around giving him a grading, I guess, because, again, 23 games played. Most of them were maybe 10 minutes each appearance, if that. So, again, a lot of it was experience. So, for Phillip Broberg, this was a short sequence. But we're giving him C+ just because, the advanced numbers aren't fantastic. That does need work. I know, again, he wasn't really playing too much. And if he's on the ice for a goal in that very little time that he's playing, it's going to affect that goals against, per 60 minutes. Again, as mentioned, Phillip Broberg has all the tools to be a fantastic defenseman, a top 2 pairing, or top 4 pairing, I should say, for the Edmonton Oilers. In the NHL, really, he has that skating. He is a facilitator. He reads the game so well. He has he can shoot the puck. He has the size, and as I mentioned, he can skate. He has great feet with that size, which is a scary combination. The Edmonton Oilers have a lot of big defensemen coming up. Phillip Broberg, as I mentioned, Marcus Niemelainen, Vincent Desharnais, who's 6'7", 230 pounds. Whoa! Michael Kesselring, who's also 6'5+. Phil Kemp, who's also 6'5+. Those are 5 guys right there. That is almost an entire defensive core over the height of 6'4". 5 of them. You're missing just one to and it'd give you the whole defenseman or defensive core, and that's basically Dmitry Samorukov. I don't want to hear anything about the Edmonton Oilers not having any depth in their prospect pool. Okay, I'm tired of this. The Edmonton Oilers not only have depth with guys like that size or the size that they have with the defensive core, but they also have forward prospects that are just Carter Savoy, Xavier I almost called him Xavier Lavoie, Xavier Bourgault, Raphael Lavoie, Tyler Tullio, I almost said Kirill Maximov, that is a throwback name, Matvey Petrov, a ton of guys coming up in the Edmonton Oilers organization. You have a lot to be excited about. I know we started off with Phillip Broberg, but there wasn't much to talk about when it came to his season. Either way, we'll call it there. Happy Thursday, everybody. Today, stay warm, or stay cool, I should say, because it's going to be a hot day in Edmonton. It's like it's 11 o'clock for me when I'm recording this, and it's 27 degrees out already. Okay, make sure you hydrate, stay safe, don't do anything I wouldn't do, okay? Have a great one.